All right, James. So, in a few words, from what I've gathered so far, you're a serial tech founder, um, big mental health advocate for founders, especially, but I think in general, and also an investor in or with some pretty interesting companies. So, I'm excited to learn more about all three of those things. So, thanks for coming on.
I'm going to say the cliche. It's great to be here, because that really is the podcasting cliche. But
Yeah.
it is great to be here.
Good.
So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for. I've seen some of the other guests, and you've got 3 or 4 of my friends on, and so yeah, when I saw them preceding me, I was thinking, yeah, fuck it, I'll get involved.
Bam, nice. Okay, well, I'm glad you're here. And now, since you mentioned the other guests, sometimes I do the kind of a podcast pitch in the beginning. Sometimes I forget. But this podcast is all about talking to interesting, inspiring, successful founders in the UK and just trying to learn a little bit about them and learn what they do and how they do things, especially because I'm always interested. We're all interested. What makes somebody successful? What makes somebody interesting? What, why they do the things they do. And so that's what we talk about in this podcast. So if, for everyone who's listening, if that sounds interesting, subscribe, do the thing, share, give some signal to the algorithms.
Sounds
Now,
fucking dreadful.
which part of it?
Talking to all of us idiots who try and do stupid stuff like found companies.
Dreadful for some people, for sure, but also very interesting for many others, myself especially, and then for everyone else.
Let's see.
Let's see where we go. I'm curious, so James, about just your beginnings, I guess. You've talked, you're quite public about your life and about everything that's happening in your life. You share a lot on LinkedIn. You shared, I think, a little bit about your childhood as well. But if we just kind of start there, what you're, I think you've been a founder pretty much almost your whole career, more or less. Started a bunch of different things.
God, it makes me old, doesn't it?
Uh, experienced,
I'm
experienced.
29. I'm 29 going on 69, I think.
So still a
So
candidate for Forbes 30 under 30.
well, I'm still waiting for that. Didn't Obviously they've just come out this week, and I didn't get the. I didn't pay enough money to be involved in it, so
Okay, we missed
so
that one.
I missed that one. I
Um,
got Tech Round 29 under 29 though, but I just haven't posted about it because it's not Forbes, and I'm a bit like, people are going to be like, oh well, it's not quite Forbes, so you just
maybe
you're
that's the
you're
next
you're
thing.
trying to
Okay.
be somebody, but actually you're a nobody. Um, and but yeah, I did get that. Was a nice accolade to get, but nobody saw it because I didn't put it out there, which is one of the only
Now we
things I
know.
haven't
Now, now,
actually put. Now we do know,
now,
yeah.
now it's here in the intro, so everyone's gonna know
uh,
about it.
uh, where did it all begin? I came from very, very humble beginnings, where I was born to multimillionaire parents, and I'm joking. uh, I had a I had a privileged upbringing. Like, I went to private school. Like, we were very, very like, had money. Like, went on holidays. Parents did amazingly well in their careers. My dad, a very successful journalist. My mum, an entrepreneur herself. But I think I was like, I looked at the two of them and how they conducted themselves week in, week out, and how hard they worked, how passionate they believed in things. And I think, as I've reflected more recently, that has subconsciously rubbed off on me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Seeing success, understanding what success looked like, uh, being in and around highly successful people because of my parents,
mm-hmm.
jobs. Yeah, that was what I did growing up. I went to, like, I was never at school. I was literally never. I had no interest in academia whatsoever. Couldn't give a shit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I literally wanted to just play rugby and meet girls. That was me. I hate to when I see these stories of, like, founders who have been, like, coding since the age of, like, 11, and, like, doing, like, side projects like selling lemonade outside their house, the classic story, and or like sold sweets at school and then built this like half 50K ARR business off the back of it whilst typing their Forbes memos. I'm like, that was not me at all.
Hmm.
At all. And I fell into entrepreneurship. I even went to I went to uni and I studied politics. Didn't want to be a politician, so I mean, I basically landed myself with 50K worth of debt, which I still haven't paid off because I've been on a founder salary for a long, long time. And yeah, left not knowing what on earth I wanted to do. Um, I started in recruitment, and I was
Hmm.
basically selling jobs to people which didn't exist, which actually gave me the perfect uh, environment to become an entrepreneur, because I went into an executive search firm and they didn't have anybody who was building technology, media, and telco the desk there and selling jobs to McKinsey, Bain, BCG strategy consultants. So they're they're pretty intellectual people at the best of times, those guys, and know a bullshitter when they see one. And I spent 18 months populating a database in an office, calling up McKinsey partners, going, "I've got a great job for you at said tech startup and also tech company. Are you interested?" Now, this job didn't actually exist, but what I wanted to do was see if I could get them as one of my candidates, so I could then
Hmm.
farm their CV out to other
Hmm.
companies that had never heard of me before. And I was trying to broker this non-existent deal, but basically make something from nothing. And
Yeah, yeah.
I did. I got it to revenue generating, and had some great clients. Started working in the startup scene. I got headhunted by a startup called Street Bees, to kind of lead their talent function. I was 22 at the time. And so I did that for 9 months, and then I got made redundant. And those motherfuckers at Street Bees, uh, they basically got rid of me and said they didn't need the talent team the size it was. I was clearly the highest paid I was at the time, and I was cut. Um, and so I was like, "Fuck you! I'm going to start a company. I don't know what. I'm going to start a
Uh-huh.
company." Uh, and that was how I started my first company.
Wow. Okay. So was that one of those things when you're in the beginning, you're like, "Oh my God, this is horrible," but then that horrible thing turns out to be the best thing that happened to you, or was not quite like that?
I started out building that company having never ever pitched to an investor in my life. I didn't even know what a
Hmm.
product was. I knew what engineers were, but all I had was a network of people who were from my um, recruitment days, who were interesting in the field of startups.
Hmm.
That's where I started. This business was a weight loss tech business that I actually started with my mum. Um, I productized her. Uh,
So yeah. So what does that mean?
so my mum was a cognitive hypnotherapist, and she was, well, we were at the time, and this business is still going. Is doing what, 4 million revenue this year. It's pretty. It's a
Okay.
nice business. Um, we were selling this course, which allowed people to listen to a 10-minute recording on their iPhone, and through hypnosis, we could retrain your brain's relationship with food. Now, this all sounds
Oh.
very woo woo, but actually, the science is actually there. Um, Essentially, a lot of the reason why people binge eat or overeat is not because they just enjoy eating lots of food. They're having this emotional connection with food, which is actually detrimental to their brain. So, for example, they might be binge eating to self harm. They might be eating because they are not very confident. They're stressed, etc., etc. And if you can interrupt that kind of brain pattern, that behavioral pattern, and then reset the neural pathways with new ones, which were healthier, then you can let go of the emotional connection with food, and you can allow people to make healthier lifestyle choices. 100, well, almost over 100,000 people later across the world. That company is doing amazing things for amazing people, working with the NHS, clinical trials done. And my mum is an extraordinary entrepreneur, like still 60 years old, still crushing it, like 12, 13 hours a day, team of 15 now. And I'm exceptionally proud of her. If she's listening to this, she won't, but yeah. And that to me was my first taste of success and failure, because I left the company because I actually failed to raise the money. I was trying to raise £1 million for it, and
To
people
build
were
the
like,
product or for what?
"Yeah, to build more product and to scale."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, raising £1 million when you're this like, you barely have like a pube on your face, like 23-year-old, and you're working with your mum, and she doesn't have a fucking clue what you're raising money for either. She just knows that she's bootstrapped this business, and it's done really well so far. And you go to investors and you're like, "Hey, we're a really investable pair," and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, you're fucking not." And so and so it was at that moment where I was like, geez, this is actually really, really insanely hard. And it then became clear that my mum and I were having different visions for the business. And I was also struggling with my mental health at the time. And so we kind of parted company. I sold all of my shares. Well, not all of them, but I sold a lot of them back. I'm still a shareholder in the business. And I just wanted my mum back, basically, not a business partner.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that was my first real, like, eyes opening moment of, number one, just how hard it is to do something like this. And number two, also, like, don't build companies with your mum. Whoever's listening to
Yeah.
this, if there are very, I'm assuming, tiny majority of idiots who will do that. Yeah, don't do it.
Okay, quick break because I need to tell you something. My friend PJ reached out recently because he's hiring a COO, and that's something that you might be interested in. So, PJ is the founder of Judge Me. Judge Me is one of the most successful, the highest rated Shopify apps of all times. They're based in London. They currently have 65 employees. They're growing fast. It's a profitable company. There's a lot you can learn in the COO role. They're looking to grow the company from 7 to 50 million over the next 6 years. And that's something that you can help them achieve. It's an awesome company, great culture, great team. You'll work closely with PJ. You'll learn a lot, and you'll help scale this company. So if that's something you might be interested in, I'll put the link in the show notes. And if the job description is still available, that means that the role is still open. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you're interested, apply. Now let's go back to the episode. Yeah, guys, the same thing goes for some different but similar for friends or partners, like romantic partners. It's like you can do it, right? And there's some very successful examples, but also you need to know what you're getting yourself into, because it can be the best thing ever, but it can also be the worst thing ever. And if it's the
The
worst, you
two
just need to, I guess,
there's an
realize the
example
consequences.
there's two people who do it amazingly well, and those guys actually just went on Dragon's Den. You should get them on this podcast, by the way. Is Joe and Lottie Gray, and they are building a sports recovery business, and they are married. The first couple of times I met them, I actually didn't know they were married, which is also the hallmark of,
Uh-huh.
like, it shows it can be done. If you don't know you're married, and you're meeting someone, or they don't know that you're married, like, fair play to you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they are two exceptional founders, Joe, ex-rugby player, Lottie run companies before, who are doing it very, very well. Definitely, you should explore that on this podcast. Actually, I think it'd be a cool episode. Get a husband and wife, or a wife and husband on.
That'd be cool. And yeah, they sound interesting. I know a few successful examples. One that's, I guess, a well-known couple or somewhat well-known, I guess, at least in the entrepreneurial circles in the UK, are Danny Buck and what's the name of his wife? They have Crafted. They
Oh
do
yeah,
men's jewelry. They have a few brands, right? So they have Brand Builder is the name of the parent company, and then they have a few different brands. They do tens of millions in revenue. I think over 50 million probably per year. And they started it together. They're running it together. They seem to be doing fine. Obviously, I don't know about the personal side of the story, but the business is doing more than really well. But so one part, so because you guys, it's funny you said I productized my mom basically, right? So you guys did build like a technical product, and that went well, or was it more just like a content kind of product, not that
it's a
much tech
it's
involved
a
in there?
content driven product. There's little
Mm-hmm,
tech in it now.
mm-hmm,
I wanted to build tech because that
mm-hmm.
was the assumption I made, that is what the user base and the market needed, which is actually not true. So no, it's a content product. There's a lot to be said really about running, and we can get onto this as well. But like, get on like building a business which, number one, is sustainable and doesn't require that much capital.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's something I am still. One of my companies is doing that, and I'm excited about that. Obviously, Baseline is sort of doing it, but we have investors. But um, there's a lot to be said for bootstrapping, and it doesn't get enough recognition, I think, because bootstrapping is really hard, especially if you're a solo founder. Anyway, I digress, but yeah.
So my first real startup was funded startup, right? We raised some funding, raised about 500,000, and we built stuff, and we failed. Um, and I actually, after that, I didn't want to raise again. I think both things are so each, from my experience, each fundraising obviously is hard and takes a lot of time, and you have investors that you're sort of responsible in a way. I felt responsible for their money, and there are all sorts of expectations and so on, and pressure for usually very significant growth. um, so those are the challenges that come with fundraising, right? And then on the other side, bootstrapping, you don't have any of that, but you need to be profitable. You got payroll
Mm,
to meet every month, and that comes with different sort of pressure.
yeah, true, true.
So I don't know which one's better. I think it's a matter of choice or preference, or I want to say like try both, see what works. But well,
Neither's better,
yeah,
because you can build a venture-backed business and do it well, and
yeah.
um, you can also build a bootstrap a business which is cash flow positive, which numbers are fantastic, but again, pressure, which is you've always got to have money in the bank, and cash is king, basically, regardless of whether you're in venture or whether you're
Mm,
bootstrapping. And if you can ensure cash is king, then happy days.
mm-hmm. Agree. Cool. So that was the first business. You productized your mom. And then next, so was that next was Luna?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was Luna?
So in January 2021, yeah, I rescued a dog called Diesel. He was an eight-year-old Alaskan Malamute, like this. It was like basically a small horse. I'm referring to him in the past tense, like he's dead. He's actually in the other room, but uh, yeah, he's like a small horse, and he came to us with loads of behavioral problems. Like he had a bit of resource guarding. He had a lot of like issues coming off the lead, and I wanted a dog that I could let off the lead, etc. And so I started looking at like dog training apps, or like where can I find a dog trainer, or like spaces that I could understand the area more. And the problem was in sitting and walking, you've got Rover. So you've got a platform there, or WAG. Like you've got a platform there which finds you people to look after your dog or walk your dog. With training, that doesn't exist. And this was at the height of the pandemic. This was like January 2021. 2 million dogs had been bought in COVID. And I was like, there must be more people out there who struggle with finding a dog trainer. And there was loads and loads and loads of people. Every time I spoke to anybody about it with a dog, they were like, yeah, this is a problem. Then I did some market research, and I started to think about like, why was it a problem? The market is basically full of like small business owners. Every dog trainer is a small business owner trying to build a decentralized, like subcontracted, like tech products. Difficult. How do you match each their own? Obviously, Uber did it. I was kind of looking at it as an Uber model. Like this is the Uber for dog training, but slightly more simplistic. And then I was like, well, what would I use? Well, I want a app where I could upload my dog's problems via video or pictures, content basically of my dog's problems. And I'd be matched to the best suited dog trainer anywhere in the world, because you can do dog training over Zoom. They prove that it works, etc., etc. And that is where I started really exploring the dog training world, and realized that actually there was a business here. It's super niche, but I like niche companies because you can build a community, you can build brand recognition quicker, and you can be known for something. Especially if you've got a niche company which is in a market where there's virtually like fuck all going on. It's quite a nice space. And then you look at adjacent markets, and you've got a benchmark against your current company. What I mean by that is you can see actually in adjacent markets it's working. So it's a less risk for potential capital coming into the company. So yeah, I just started building it and found early investors, raised a pre-seed off a pitch deck, which actually like you can't really do anymore in this environment.
We did the
Unless
same. That
yeah,
we did the same. We had a pitch deck, which just now sounds crazy.
it's crazy. Yeah,
That's all we had.
yeah, that's literally all I had. I had a pitch deck and an Excel spreadsheet of a waitlist, and yeah, that company was amazing. Like we found our first like 1,000 users. We actually pivoted the company to. I started off wanting to build a marketplace. Then we realized that actually a SaaS-enabled marketplace was going to be best. And then we were like, well, we need to focus on the SaaS, because actually if we can solve supply, then we'll solve demand. So we spent basically 2 years building SaaS. And the problem was that the SaaS that we built was so fucking big that we made a whole ton of mistakes around like getting a product out there, or getting a proportion of a product which we could build upon and see if we could get paying users. And that's really what I wanted to build. I wanted to build a company where we could have a product where people pay for it. I mean, this sounds mental. I'm saying like whilst I'm saying it, but there's so many companies who don't operate that way, and I actually personally think it's coming to an end, that realm of thinking. But yeah, we were trying to build a product which people pay for, and there was lots of mistakes I made during that time. Number one, I don't think I hired the right team. We actually outsourced a lot of our development, which I would never do again. And because with outsourced development, I find that they just like yes, 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 everything,
Yeah.
and there's no like pushback on anything you're trying to build. Because as an
There's no
entrepreneur, I'll be like,
long-term
yeah,
commitment in there.
exactly. They're just like great. The more we say yes, the more they're going to give us money because the longer it takes. And we
Mm.
were race against time. So ultimately, I then started to what was it? August 2022 started to feel very unwell. Like my mental health had nosedived again. What I should have said was in 2020, I'd uh, had a really bad episode of depression to the point where I tried to commit suicide twice. And I then had a psychotic episode we now realize was psychosis in and around that period. And I got better. I was taking antidepressants, but finding that I was feeling very energized a lot of the time, like
Mm.
and waking up at 4 a.m. doing crazy shit, like feeling like I was very like overinflated sense of like confidence and ego. But this was not recognized at the time, and I actually built Luna in that phase of fuck yeah, this is going to be
Yeah.
this could be a
Yeah.
billion-dollar company. Here we go. And to be honest with you, that's how it was built. Um,
Mm.
and then in August 2022, it was almost like I'd fallen off a cliff. Like I was struggling to function. I needed to raise money again. Problem was we didn't have the traction to raise like a seed round. Like we just didn't have those numbers. And I then was trying to gauge investor reaction, but it wasn't very forthcoming. And so we just tried to put the product out there, but I was having arguments with my CTO about this where I was going, hey, like we've got like 4 months runway. And if we don't actually put the product out there into the open and gather more crucial feedback, like there will be no company. Because I'm not going to raise any more money for this company until we actually can have the hypothesis set and we can understand what is working, what's not working, because it gives me something to sell. Like, what am
Mm.
I going to sell? I'm going to say the same shit that I said with the last round. But I was just quickly becoming like unable to like function, struggling to get up, which is not me anyway. Like I'm very early riser. Felt like I was having burnout, but I wasn't. I was just having like all these awful thoughts again. And I sat down with my wife and she said, James, I just don't think you should do this anymore. Like, you need to look after yourself because we're going to go back to 2020. And so it was at that moment where I made the decision to tell my co founder that I needed to kind of step away from the business to
Mhm.
look after myself. And I resigned to shareholders. I took a bit of cash away, not much. Uh, some would call it an exit. I would call it I can go to McDonald's. And no, I got a bit more than that, but and yeah, it was a really really difficult part of my life, to be honest with you, because I was like, well, am I failing, or
Mm.
am I ill, or am I just not able to do this? Like, is
Mhm.
being
Yeah.
a founder who I am? I don't even know who I am anymore. That's why I kept saying to Abby, I was like, I actually don't know who I am anymore. Like, it was an existential crisis for me where we were like, okay, well, what do I do? How do I behave? How, like, do I get a job? Like, do I want a job? Like, I
Mm.
don't think I'm very employable. And I had to take some time out. And then moving into like December 2022 was a really, really bad period. I was really unwell. I was at a New Year's Eve party and started hearing voices again in front of my friends. And it was that moment when I was like, God, dude, this isn't depression. Like, I was diagnosed by a GP with depression, given antidepressants, but
Mhm,
this wasn't
mhm,
depression.
yeah.
Like, you don't have these highs, these lows. You don't do impulsive stuff. Like, you don't make stupid decisions based on that. Yeah. And that brings us into 2023.
Before we continue with 2023, I mean, there's a few directions where we can take this, but so eventually you got diagnosed with bipolar, right? Which I think you didn't mention yet. But I think for a lot of people who might be listening, they're like, "This is crazy. This is a strange experience," because I don't think there's a lot of awareness necessarily about bipolar and about the things that you talked about right now, about the
Mm.
mental health issues. I am unfortunately quite familiar with it because one of my closest friends has gone through the same thing. He's not an entrepreneur, but quite ambitious, career-driven person. I think I've introduced you guys. I'm not sure if you had a chance to talk or not. It was some weeks ago, but the same kind of thing, right? The same where you go from the lowest lows to the highest highs, and when you're on the highest highs, it's like you're convinced that you can change the world, right? And you are changing the world during those moments, and you're just 24/7. There is no time to sleep there. You just move forward and produce and have all these ideas, and you take action on those ideas, and it sounds like the best thing ever until it all starts crashing down, and it's the opposite of the best thing ever suddenly. But I know you said something interesting before, right? Like you said, that's what Luna was built on, and I know there's another entrepreneur in the UK who kind of talked about that. He talked open about his bipolar, and I think he also talked about like that's what kind of drove me to build the business. That's what gave me ambition, and then I just have those waves when I produce a lot of stuff, but then I also have waves when I just cannot do anything. I just need to step back, and
Mm.
I don't want to do anything. So how, bipolar and entrepreneurship, how does that work hand in hand? Because in some ways there's like all this stuff that you can get done during those highs, but then there's also it's not really sustainable at all. I
Mm.
think far from it. Does it just make everything, does it make both your job and your life more difficult? I don't know.
Um, so the first thing I'd say is that 72% of entrepreneurs suffer with some sort of mental condition, whether that's
Mm,
anxiety, whether that's depression, whether that's OCD, whether that's bipolar disorder, whether it's like ADHD, etc. For whatever
Asperger's,
reason,
I think it's quite common as
yeah,
well.
for whatever reason, entrepreneurs are more likely than the average Joe to, or quote unquote normal people, to be afflicted with some sort of mental disorder. Now, I personally believe that's because entrepreneurship has these incredible highs and these incredible lows, and there's nothing really more than that. Um, and some people get on the high train more than others, and some people get on the low train more than others. But if you find me an entrepreneur who's actually stable, I'd laugh at you because they're not stable. Secondly, entrepreneurs are actually 11 times more likely to be on the bipolar spectrum, and about 90% of entrepreneurs are undiagnosed. That's an awful
Mm,
lot of people who exhibit bipolar symptoms but do nothing about it. Um, for me, I didn't particularly want to be diagnosed with this.
mm,
I was possibly on the more extreme side of the condition where the symptoms were more noticeable, and were picked up. And also, like when you try to commit suicide twice, I actually wasn't hospitalized or anything, because it was the early days of COVID. Like nobody really knew apart from my wife, and we were like, right, we'll just get into therapy and we'll get into like
Mhm.
the GP. But I didn't really talk to anyone about it. It Bipolar disorder gives me superpowers that other people don't have, and I say that in the nicest possible way. Like I can, uh, as you say, have more output with work. I have ability to be more creative, and I have like visions for how I see the world, and actually, like I might go and try and action upon them. Now, the downside of
Mm.
that is there's cons, right? So, um, I can also be afflicted with like very deep depression with type 2. Um, I have to medicate, which I say is a con because I still don't quite know. And this is me being completely honest and transparent. Like, I don't know what it's doing to my brain chemistry or my body composition. I take lithium, which is one of the most high powered um, medications, but also the best for bipolar disorder. But is it going to give me permanent kidney damage? It's something I think about a lot. Um, there is also now an element where I'm building a bipolar business. I say bipolar business, like I'm
Mhm.
building a business that is hoping to help people on the bipolar spectrum live better and live better lives. And that gives me an enormous like privilege because um, A, I'm solving for myself and my wife, but B, there's a lot of people who really, really need help in the UK. Uh, there's about 1.5 million people diagnosed. There's about 4.5, 5 million people affected if you include friends and family. Um, and that's a huge, huge number where there's nothing for. Running a company with bipolar is also hard because you have to find, or I have to work with people who understand
Mm.
what I go through. I'm lucky that my co-founder is also bipolar. His exhibits in very different ways to mine actually, and I wouldn't say he's had a full blown like episode like I have, but he was diagnosed nonetheless. Um,
Mhm.
does it hinder investors coming into the company? I'd be lying to say it probably did. I've not been told yet that I'm investing in you because you're bipolar, and we see it as a huge risk. But like, it would be a consideration I would have as an investor,
Yeah.
if I wasn't bipolar. Like, what about my money? So
Mm.
it's really not easy. However, like, it kind of is what it is. I'm 29. I got diagnosed when I was 28. Either get on and live my life and not let this define me, or I sit there and wallow and likely do something more sinister because I'm not following my true path. So life moves on. I have to be overly aware of my stress levels, which sounds hilarious, building a startup, raising money, all this kind of shit. But I do. Um, I have to have specific routines. My sleep has to be on point. Problem is, over 5 weeks ago, my first son was born, so my sleep patterns have been completely fucked. Um, I have to look at my wellness routines from like I really need to be in the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week. I need to be soldering, cold plunging. I need community. These are all actually things that most people should do in their wellness, regardless of whether they're
Yeah.
bipolar or not. But I
Yeah.
have to just be a bit more aware,
Mhm.
and I'm kind of comfortable with that because at the end of the day, like if I could be the healthiest version of me, then I'm going to give a good account of myself.
Then that's probably a good thing. Yeah. And I want to get to that later again because I think that's interesting in general. like the wellness routines and the health, and like how to, because as you said, I think that's important for everyone and for everyone in general, but I think that's also how everyone can actually perform at their best. And I think you need to figure out, as you said, like how do you actually fit that into your busy schedule, right? Because I think a lot of people think that you need to sacrifice everything, and I think you do need to sacrifice a lot to start a successful company, but you need to be smart about those sacrifices, or very calculated about which things you do consciously decide to sacrifice on and which ones you don't. And health is not necessarily one of those things that you want to sacrifice. um but let's talk about baseline first a little bit more. You mentioned, right, so that's your latest company now, where you are, I guess the mission there is to support people with bipolar.
Um, Baseline is born out of my frustration with the system. I had a 6.5 year diagnosis journey with bipolar, and it led me to go to the GP and be misdiagnosed with depression, given antidepressants which only made me go higher and higher, so it made me feel worse. Well, it made me feel better, but then the crashes made me feel worse. And then when I went to a psychiatrist, actually, first and foremost, in February 2023, I went to the GP, and they basically said, "Look, we're going to refer you to psychiatrist. The waiting list is 11 months." And I was like, "No, I will go private." So I found a fantastic psychiatrist who only works with CEOs and entrepreneurs, which was like an important step for me because I wanted to work with somebody who got me.
Mm-hmm.
After half an hour, he diagnosed me with type 2 bipolar disorder, which is more on the depressive side for people that don't know. So you've got type 1 and type 2. Type 1, you exhibit more hypomanic or manic episodes. And on type 2, did I say type 1 or type 2 then?
You said type 1 is more.
Okay, type 1, yeah. And so type 2, you exhibit more depressive episodes, but you have hypomanic episodes too. I was type 2. I was prescribed lithium, which we just spoke about, and I was given 2 pieces of paper that showed me what the condition was, what hypomania was, what depression was, some charities. And that was it. I was like, come again. I've just been diagnosed, bearing in mind, with a serious mental illness, apparently. And although I don't classify myself as mentally ill, I understand why. But yeah, I'd just been diagnosed with a serious mental illness, and my wife was looking at me going, we kind of knew this was happening, but equally like, well, this is a huge step. Where does this leave us with our life? We've got loads of questions. Is there any technology? Is there any like community? Like, where's it, like learning content? Like, I was like, is there any AI? I thought it'd be quite cool. And it turns out there's just fuck all like for anybody. Went home and I was like, what? Look, there's no apps. Like, you got some mood tracking apps because you're meant to track your moods. I actually don't because baseline's coming. But yeah, you're meant to track your moods, and it can give you a little like plotting on the graph whether you're high or low and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, well, I knew that. And you can see whether you were low or high over the last couple of weeks, happy days. And you can go on Facebook and go on the really exhausting Facebook groups that basically every other post is somebody who's wanted to commit suicide. And then you can start to Google what bipolar disorder is and how do I treat it? Like, what should I do? Like, how do I tell my mom, my dad, all this kind of stuff? And it'll tell you that you've also got lung cancer. And you're
As
like,
internet typically does tell you.
yeah. And you're like, wow, this is a mess. And so here in this is where Baseline was born. I was like, well, I'm pretty lazy actually, and I don't want to be inputting my moods. Surely they could track my data, so my sleep, my activity levels, um, maybe some of my phone data, so my social media usage, etc., etc. These are all key components of whether you are in a depressive or a hypomanic
Mhm,
or manic
mhm,
episode. And it could make a prediction, or it could tell me whether, like, it thinks I might be uh, in a certain potential mood. And I can just go, yeah, actually, you're right. I can do that once a day. Gives me a notification where I could go, yeah, I think, yeah. So I could actually automate mood tracking. I could also have a AI companion which is trained on 15,000 peer-reviewed articles, specifically on bipolar medication and psychiatry. So I could, any question that arises, or I could interact with it, like, it's going to give me the right peer-reviewed uh, answers, and um, it's going to help me on my journey. And then I could have an in-app like community of like somewhat positive people, but people who are, yeah, some people are going through difficult stuff, but people who are generally interested in bipolar, from whether it's a research perspective, whether that's a delving deeper, whether it's more of a philosophical perspective about work, relationships, etc. A community that I can feel engaged with, not just like, okay, well, is anybody awake? Like, I feel shit. Sent
mhm,
at 4:30 in the morning. Um, and also, I was like, well, I really love learning, and content is for me a way to digest and understand. And I'm also like content creator. I create great videos, and I can authentically do that. So, like, surely it'd be pretty cool to have like the masterclass for bipolar in an app, and
mhm,
I
mhm,
could learn from experts. I could learn from my peers, content creators. I could um, learn about in depth about the topic, and it all be in one place, and it all be knowledge which is potentially peer reviewed, but not like sponsored through Google. And I started pitching this idea to lots of people. Started finding more and more people with bipolar, and they were like, "This is exactly what I want." Um,
mhm,
and that is where Baseline was born. We look at it as a bipolar playground. Come into the app and work with us on automatic mood tracking, engage with community. Like, if you're interested in how we diving deeper into your condition, you can through content, etc. And it's been a fun ride so far. It's been the best thing I've ever done. It's also been really, really hard, because I think the investor landscape for this is like a bit weird. Um, I think some investors are a bit like, "Is this really a market?" And I was like, "Are you fucking joking me?" Uh, it's actually a big market. It's about 150 million people worldwide. Try finding that in other invested markets too. Um, I think there's like a bit of like doubt over whether we can do it, because nobody's ever built anything remotely similar to this
mhm.
in bipolar, and apart from mood tracking, but they're not really investable. So there's been some. It's been hard, but equally we're like, well, we want to work with mission-driven angels in this raise, and we've got uh, 3 or 4 now who are fantastic. We've got a really small team, but it's a team of people who care, who are often actually volunteering, which is really cool. And we're going out into beta, first 150 people in 6 weeks, which would be awesome. And then we will see what happens from there.
So I guess it's, you said nobody's ever built that before, but I guess it's one of those things. Same as you mentioned in the beginning, it's been there. There's similar apps, I guess, done in other niches, perhaps, and just nobody's done it for bipolar.
Yep.
Mm. Which is, well, I mean, I agree with what you said in the beginning, right? It's generally a good sign. You can kind of see what's happening in a different niche, and you can take some benchmarks from there and just build the thing in your own niche. But I'm curious, so how are you doing it differently this time? As in terms of building the business, but also maybe building the product, right? As you mentioned with Luna, it took a while, potentially too long. I think that's what you were kind of hinting towards.
I think with
How's
Luna,
the difference
we
there?
went too big on the first product, and we tried to build too much. Um,
Mm,
this time we are not building that much, and we're using a lot of like third party piece together like APIs to do it, and just to test um, how this actually might work. Um, I think we've built the team differently this time as well. There's only 3 of us really, um, and um, and a couple of other like volunteers. Whereas at Luna, I had a team of 16. Um,
mm,
and I generally think we're taking the approach of like we start really really small, and then we will inevitably branch out into something we hope much bigger. But um, we really really need to sit with users to do that, and we could just go build an app that we really wanted, but like at the end of the day, what I want is probably different to what Catherine wants. Um, and so we're just taking time to do that and not being, I suppose, taking a more classical approach to MVP early product building, um, which is really important. Um, it comes with some headaches though, because it's like, well, time versus money, like small approach versus go raise a bigger round. How do we do that? When can we go do that? So that's not easy, but equally, at the end of the day, if we have a product out there which people are using and people are loving, um, we kind of argue that it doesn't matter if people are paying for it at this stage, as long as we can see there's like great usage stats, and that's what we're focusing on, which is whilst we're going to be pushing for a product which people will buy, uh, we really, really want to have fantastic usage stats because it drives other areas of what we want to do. Whether we want to go raise raise a pre-seed in September, October, November, or we go and continue to keep raising angel money. Those options are just critical, especially in this climate. Like, I think the fundraising climate right now is a bit weird. Like, I think we're in a better position than what we were. Obviously, I think there's very few. It was a complete bloodbath last year, but
mm.
um, I think the goalposts as well for fundraising have shifted in a weird way recently. If you're not a founder who's got like $100 million exit, for example, or even a $50 million exit, like the what we've seen, especially with like European and UK venture, is this want for revenue, which is hilarious, isn't it?
Mm,
Right, for pre-seed. Never what pre-seed used to be about, but it is what it is now, and that's fine. Means that entrepreneurs need to be smarter, and figure out how they can do things more efficiently. It does also mean that European venture and UK venture and US up to a point, but US is much more slack on this. Um, it does mean that, like, in our experience, when we were raising, so the timeline for raising with Baseline was actually we went to raise a pre-seed, but spoke to about 100 VCs in the space of like 6 weeks, and the message was, we really really love this, team's great, but we just need more traction. So we were like, fine, what we're going to actually do is raise half the money, raise an angel round, and see and drop the valuation slightly, and then move into a pre-seed when we are ready, so that we're not trying to flog a pre-seed if when it's not quite there. European VCs and UK VCs were like, yeah, please just come back to us when you've got like maybe 250, 500k ARR, like, and actually evaluation, you're on course to be $1 billion. I was like, you're fucking idiots. And so I was like, wow, pre-seed is it's really shifted. Founders now need to go into a pre-seed raise having some level of good traction. Long gone are the idea of the days where you raise a pre-seed on an idea in a deck. I'm sure there are people out there doing it right now, but for the most part, that isn't the case, I don't think.
And what with angels, that is more acceptable, or what was your pitch for the angels?
No, I think now we're technically in a friends and family round, for example. Angels have very different. I say very. Angels can have different expectations of what they want out from this. Like, they're either putting between 5 and, I don't know, like sometimes 50k into the company, and they really like the team. Often they know the team deeply. They'll know one of the co-founders, and they're willing to make a bet. Whereas I think, and so the pitch to like angels was like, do you like this or not? And if you do, like, put 10k in. That's all it is. Put 20k in. Like, come with us on this journey. If you're affected by bipolar, let's do this. Whereas ventures, like, which of course, like, ventures about making money for their LPs, right, and also the fund, but it's like, well, we need to see more, but also we want a valuation which is less, and generally speaking, you'd be hard pressed not to find a VC who's looked at a company recently and gone, I can get a good deal out of this, versus being like, no, we're gonna back the founders here, and we just believe in them, and I think that has been from the conversations I'm having with founders as well, that's the case. And I do think with venture it's going to be an interesting period, because we've got a lot of people raising funds at the moment. Like, I've been approached by 3, and I've been approached to like help the fund out, like become potentially an advisor and operating partner. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure the metrics work. Like, the economics don't really stack up. Like, you're raising a 10, 15, 20 million fund. Like, they don't stack up because you're trying to chase like unicorns raising on that level of fund. Whereas I think there's going to be a size fund. Sorry, there's going to be a shift of, and I hope there's a shift as well. I think it'd be a nice shift to have, which is venture raises a fund and their LPs are expecting a 3 to 5-6x return. It changes the entire dynamics of how a fund meets and works with founders and potentially deploys capital, because it's a different environment. And I hope that we see that shift in venture. We're of course not going to see it across the board, because that would be ridiculous. But I like the funds now, more and more funds who are like, we're not actually looking for the levels of returns, or the LPs aren't looking for the levels of returns. But we are wanting to work with great founders and build great businesses. I've probably said too much there.
Well, it seems like a topic that you think about and that you're you got your opinions about, which I guess is in part also because you do some investing, right? And there's one particular thing that I have to ask about, which is I saw you invested in Discord.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
Um, story is I came in on secondary. One of the syndicates I'm in had a fantastic deal, and uh, got hold of an allocation somehow, and I was like, Discord's an interesting one because I firmly believe it'll be a similar story to Reddit, although I haven't seen Reddit's share price today, so I could be biting myself in the ass. Um, where I think it will trade well, and I think it will float first and foremost. Um, and I think it will float within the next 2-3 years. And
Mhm.
it's got insanely good metrics. Uh, and so I was like, well, look, I like being an early stage investor, but equally, I need to pay school fees somehow. Um, so if I can get a quick win here and there, then I'm going to take it. Um, and I think that might be a good quick win and one that I might get lucky on. So yeah, God, I'm the worst investor ever, aren't I?
Oh wow. No, that's cool though. Yeah, I think obviously I'm not involved. I don't do investing. I'm a bit of a user of Discord, but I think it's one of those companies that's highly likely going to do well. I think it's one of those
It's
at this
already doing
point.
well, yeah.
Yeah, it's already doing really well, and it seems unlikely that they would just suddenly fail or get disrupted. I think they're just gonna grow, like keep growing for a while, and then, as you said, probably an IPO that's gonna be a likely a good IPO. So
I hope so. I need a good IPO.
nice. Well, yeah. Hopefully that's gonna work out well. Um, Last question, which we kind of touched on that a little bit before, but taking care of your well-being, and you do a bunch of stuff, as you said, and I talk about that a lot. I feel always quite conscious about my health because I just think it's so important. I think you cannot function well if you don't take care of your mind and body, right? And for the last 10 years or so, I've been quite obsessed with eating healthy because I think it's one of the basics, right? If you whatever you put in, that's what comes out, right? If you eat shit food, you're not going to perform really well. Your body's not going to work very well. Um, you mentioned that obviously because of bipolar, you put extra effort into that, and you also do a bunch of weird things like cold plunges and possibly some other things. Um, I guess my question is, I guess I have two questions. One, besides cold plunges, is there anything else that's weird that you do that would be interesting to hear? And the second part is just a lot of people are busy and they just don't have the time or the energy to put in the effort in taking care of their well-being. What's your take on that, or what's your advice for that? How do you approach
uh,
it?
Let me do the second question first. Get off your fucking asses and get in the gym and go and like get in a cold plunge. No, I'm joking. Uh, no, seriously, people should just take this seriously because you get one life,
Mhm.
um, and I think when people say to me, "Oh, I don't have time," I'm like, bullshit. Like, make time. Come on. Like,
Mm.
I'm trying to make time, and I've got a 5 week old, a 6 week old now. It's like, well, I can still get to the gym for a couple of hours. I've just got to, set aside the time even to go for a run. So, so
For me, sorry for interrupting. For me, it's one of those things that I'm like, it sounds so smart as when you say that, but it's one of those things when I don't have the time not to do it because I know that I'm gonna so regret that if I don't do it. And the other part is I just try to systemize it in some way, optimize it in some way, right? Like how can I make sure that it doesn't take too much time, or that it just
so
that
in
it's
my
easy? How
diary,
do you make it easy?
every day I have gym and lunch 12:45 to 3 p.m. looking at right now. That's every single day. Now, sometimes I don't do that, but my intention is every single day I will assess whether I can do that. And if I can't do that, I'll go for a run or I'll do something. Um, but if I can get to the gym 4 times a week, 5 times a week, then I'm going to be in a good place. Doesn't just have to be in the gym. I appreciate that for a lot of people, like running or dancing or um, shooting or like going walking, like there's so many different facets to wellness that you really just need to find what works for you and have it as a non-negotiable, because your audience is founders, right? Like founders, it's such a hard game. And I've made this mistake twice now, and it's almost cost me my life, where I wasn't looking after myself. And I'm an extreme example. I appreciate that. But I was still not looking after myself, and it can catch up with you. And I think so. The first question is what else? So I love cold plunge and sauna. Like like I said, I gym. I do a lot of weight training. I've been doing a bit more like high intensity, like assault bike training recently, but I like lifting weights. I'll do 10 minutes in the sauna, 3 minutes in the cold plunge. I've got a cold plunge now at my gym, which is fantastic. Um, and so I cycle those. If I can do that for 4 days a week, then like those numbers add up. I sometimes microdose magic mushrooms. Haven't been over the last month, but actually I've not been feeling myself recently because it's just all this like lack of sleep's been catching up with me. So I was gonna start on another course on Saturday. I really like microdosing magic mushrooms because it gives me like you're not like high or anything, or you're not like don't feel fucked up doing it, but you get a different perspective. It is for me. It's an antidepressant. It's also it's a way in which I can feel better, feel good, and I know actually a lot of founders who do it who just don't talk about it, and that I find interesting. I completely understand why, because obviously we've got obligations to employees, investors, etc., to be sensible. But equally, like if you're not, I see magic mushrooms as this is also one of those ways where I can look after myself, because it acts in very similar ways as a sertraline pill, for example, on the antidepressant side, and it's slightly more natural. Yes, it has psychedelic properties, but there's so much research now, which so much research. It's irrefutable, the benefits. So that's probably the weirdest thing I do.
I mean this one community with hundreds of founders in there, and I think somebody asked if anyone would be interested in having a separate conversation thread on microdosing. I think it was something around like, would somebody be interested in having a conversation about that? And I've never seen more interest in any other topic in that community. So I think, yes, as you said, I think it's much more common than we think, because there's still quite a lot of stigma around it. But I think it's becoming more and more. There's more and more awareness around it, more and more research as well, and just all the benefits of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think we should be afraid of talking about it. I think that it's a way, it's a proven way in the US, some elements of mainland Europe, to ease pressures on people, and I'm probably going to get a load of stick and feedback off this, but fuck it. So yeah, I take magic mushrooms and
That's a great ending of the episode. Ending on a high note. No, honestly, yes, I appreciate your honesty and openness and like sharing everything as it is. The things, also the things that some people don't want to talk about in public. And you talk about a lot of cool stuff on your LinkedIn as well. So obviously, I'm going to put that in the show notes. So people should go follow you. And learn a lot of cool stuff from you. So, James, thanks for coming on. It was a deep conversation. A lot of cool stuff. I appreciate I got the chance to learn a lot about you and from you.
thank you for having me. Enjoyed the episode, and if you are listening to this and you're bipolar, we are about to launch our beta with our app, and that is in 6 weeks' time. And you'll get the product for free for life if you come and give us some time, and we would love to have you.
Awesome, cool, really cool stuff that you're building. So appreciate that. I think that's sounds like it's something that's going to help a lot of people who need that. So that's really cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. And well, everyone who listened until the end, do the thing, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Show the algorithm. We need to get this podcast to the top 5%. Everyone who's listening, you know that already. That's the goal for this year. And I know that we can do it. So that's the pod. Thank you.